I found a pregnancy test in my boyfriend's bag. He swore it was his sister's. She wasn't even pregnant. I checked his phone, called a mystery girl, and she said, "Baby, did you tell her yet?" He later told me, "You're temporary." Now he's crying, "She left me." I was standing in the doorway of our apartment in Tempe, the summer heat pressing against my back like a warning I should have listened to months earlier. He was on the couch, elbows on his knees, staring at the folder I'd dropped at his feet. Photos, phone logs, the pie's summary, every lie he'd fed me peeled open and laid out like something rotting. His face wasn't shocked. That struck me first. Not guilt, not scrambling excuses, just irritation, like I'd interrupted something more important. "You were temporary," he said, voice low and almost bored. "She's my future." The words hit so cleanly I didn't feel them at first. They settled in my chest like dust, piling, suffocating, dull and heavy. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just watched his mouth move, watched him lean back like this was the end of some negotiation I'd lost. Behind him, our half-packed boxes leaned against the wall. We'd planned to move to a bigger place near Mesa in 3 weeks. He'd let me color code the labels, let me think we were building something steady, something real. Now he was telling me the truth without flinching. The test I'd found in his backpack, the unknown number he'd called hundreds of times. The girl who answered with a laugh in her voice, "Baby, did you tell her yet?" The sister he tried to blame, who'd nearly choked on confusion when I asked her about a pregnancy that didn't exist. He'd been waiting for this moment, waiting for me to finally uncover everything so he could be done with the inconvenience of me. I remember the sound the ceiling fan made, one blade ticking every few seconds. I remember the faint citrus smell from the detergent he liked. I remember thinking, this is the moment my life splits in two. Then he said her name, softly, almost lovingly, and something inside me shifted. Not anger exactly, not yet. More like a tearing quiet, the kind that happens right before a storm hits shore. He stood up as if expecting me to leave on command, as if the conversation was already over. "It's better this way," he said. "You'll see," I nodded. I don't know why. Maybe because silence was the only thing keeping me from shaking. Maybe because I realized he had rehearsed this, and I wasn't going to give him the performance he wanted. I walked past him, past the boxes, past the life I thought we were planning, and stepped into the hall where the air suddenly felt different. Cooler, sharper, like the world was adjusting itself back into alignment without him. I didn't turn around. But before the door closed, before his living room disappeared from view, I heard him mutter under his breath, almost satisfied, "Finally." That word stuck with me, festered, hardened. Because he thought the story ended there, with him victorious and me crawling away. He had no idea what was coming. 2 weeks later, he would call me sobbing. He would choke on panic, on regret, on the consequences he never imagined would land at his feet. But in that moment, in that doorway, I didn't know the details yet. I only knew one thing with absolute clarity. I wasn't done. When people ask how I didn't see it sooner, I always think back to the first night we met at a house party in Chandler. I was 23, overworked, and still trying to scrape myself together after my last relationship detonated without warning. He came up to me like he'd been waiting for a cue, easy smile, soft voice. The kind of attention that feels like relief when you're used to being an afterthought. I remember how carefully he listened, how he repeated little details I mentioned offhand, how he made it seem like connection wasn't something I had to earn. I didn't realize then that mirroring someone is just another form of manipulation when the person doing it has no intention of staying. The first pivotal break happened a year before him. I dated someone who made me feel invisible unless he needed something: rides, money, reassurance. When I finally confronted him about how he treated me, he said I was too sensitive and left me on the sidewalk outside a bar. That night rewired me in ways I didn't understand. I told myself I'd never beg someone to choose me again. The second wound came from my own family. My mom remarried a man who never hid his dislike for me. Every holiday, every dinner, every conversation was a subtle reminder that I was tolerated, not wanted. I learned to over-explain, to soften myself, to stay small so I wouldn't disrupt anything. When you're raised on conditional affection, you mistake crumbs for a feast. So when my boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, held my face in his hands that first month and told me, "I choose you," I let myself believe it. I let myself believe he was different. Things were good for a while, better than good. He'd drive across town just to walk me to my car after late shifts. He'd sit on the floor of my apartment while I studied for work exams, telling me he liked hearing my focus voice. He met my friends, slipped into my routines, folded himself into my life so seamlessly that I stopped questioning anything. But looking back, there were cracks small enough to ignore. He guarded his phone like it was state property. He flinched whenever I asked about plans too far out. He joked a little too often about how everyone leaves eventually, a line that felt less like insecurity and more like foreshadowing. Then came the day I found the pregnancy test. I wasn't digging. I wasn't snooping. I just reached into his backpack for his charger because my phone was dying. And there it was, positive, wrapped in a paper towel, tucked beside his notebook. My stomach didn't drop. My mind didn't race. I went still, the way prey does when it finally understands the shape of the predator. When I confronted him that night, the lie came too quickly. "It's my sister's," he said. She didn't want her husband to find it. But his sister didn't even own the brand of test he claimed she used. When I called her and she said, confused and half asleep, "What? I'm not pregnant," something in me snapped into alignment. And when I checked his phone records, quietly, methodically, almost numb, and saw hundreds of calls to a number I didn't recognize, I knew I wasn't dealing with a mistake or a misunderstanding. I was dealing with someone who had built an entire second life in the shadows of mine. The betrayal wasn't just the cheating. It was that he'd let me plan a future on ground he knew was already crumbling. And that was the part I couldn't forgive. After the night I confronted him about the test and the calls, something inside me shifted into a kind of hyperclarity. It wasn't anger yet, not the kind that burns hot. It was colder, methodical, like my brain finally stopped trying to protect me from the truth. I started waking up before my alarm, eating in silence, going to work with this sharp ache under my ribs that reminded me every few minutes. He lied because he thought you were too afraid to leave. I wasn't afraid anymore. In the days that followed, I pulled away from him. He thought it was temporary distance, maybe embarrassment, something he could charm or guilt his way through. But I saw everything differently. When he reached for my waist in the kitchen, I felt nothing. When he told me he loved me, I watched the way his eyes darted, not out of passion, but calculation. He was deciding what version of himself would keep me quiet. That was the moment I realized I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof, something undeniable, something he couldn't twist into my fault. That's why I hired the private investigator. I remember sitting in my car outside a strip mall in Gilbert, hands trembling as I signed the paperwork. The PI, an older man named Grayson, looked at me with the tired expression of someone who'd seen too many people learning the same lesson. "Are you sure you want to know?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "I think I already do." The waiting was the worst part. While Grayson worked, I lived inside this suspended panic, the hours stretching thin and brittle. My friends wanted to go out to distract me, but I couldn't perform normalcy. I spent most nights on my couch, lights off, letting the quiet press in. That's when the emotional cost started to show, this bone-deep exhaustion, this loneliness that felt humiliating because it was tied to someone who had already replaced me. But I also felt something else growing under all that hurt, resolve. A stubbornness I hadn't recognized in myself before. I started running again, the way I used to in college, pounding the pavement past the sleeping houses in my neighborhood. Each mile pulled the tension taut inside me, shaping it into something cleaner, sharper. I didn't want revenge yet. I wanted clarity. I wanted control. And then, a week later, Grayson called. "I have what you asked for," he said. "You might want to sit down." I sat on the edge of my bed, knuckles white against the blanket, and listened. The details were worse than I expected, not just cheating, but timelines that overlapped in ways that made my skin crawl, lies he'd told to both of us, messages that painted me as an obstacle and her as some promised future he'd been denied. But what hit hardest wasn't the cheating, it was how deliberate everything was. He'd been grooming the narrative for months, managing both of us like we were two parts of the same script he was directing. That night, when I finally confronted him with the evidence, he didn't even bother pretending. "You were temporary," he said. "She's my future." It should have shattered me. Instead, something in me locked into place, like gears that had been misaligned suddenly clicking together. This wasn't going to end the way he thought. I thought I had the full picture. I thought the PI's report was the worst of it. The overlapping timelines, the hotel receipts, the photos of him walking into her apartment with groceries, and his hand on her lower back like he'd practiced the gesture. I thought his cold dismissal was the final blow, the one that snapped whatever was left between us. I was wrong. 3 days after he told me I was temporary, Grayson called again. His voice was flatter this time, like he was preparing himself for how I might react. "There's something you need to see," he said. "Something I didn't include in the original packet because I needed to verify it first." My stomach tightened. "Is it about the other girl?" "Yes," he said, "but it's not what you think." He asked me to meet him at a small cafe in downtown Tempe. When I got there, he already had the file open on the table, sitting untouched between us like a live wire. He didn't push it toward me. He didn't explain. He just waited until I picked it up myself. Inside was a series of screenshots, not of messages between them, but messages about me, ones she had sent to him, ones he had eagerly responded to. At first, I didn't understand what I was reading. Then the meaning dropped into my chest like a lead weight. She wasn't just another girl. She wasn't someone he'd fallen for accidentally, or someone he'd been seeing behind my back in the typical, pathetic way cheaters do. She and my boyfriend, my ex, had been planning my exit for months. The messages were explicit. Her: "You said she's insecure enough that she won't question anything. You can start pulling away soon." Him: "I'll make her think it's her fault. She'll leave on her own. Cleaner that way." Her: "Once she's gone, we can talk about the baby for real." Him: "Yeah, she won't matter anymore by then." My hands went cold. The cafe noise faded into this dull underwater hum. Each line cut through me, not because they were cruelty I could understand, but because of the precision. The intention, the planning. He hadn't drifted away. He hadn't succumbed to temptation. He had orchestrated my humiliation step by step, testing how little pushback I'd give, how few questions I'd ask, how invisible I was willing to make myself to keep the peace. And she was in on it. But that wasn't the twist, not the real one. The final page of the file showed a bank transaction, a large one from her to him, a transfer labeled retainer. I stared at the word, uncomprehending. What is this?" Grayson exhaled slowly, like he'd been hoping the verification would turn up nothing. "She hired him," he said. "Your boyfriend wasn't just cheating, he was being paid. She wanted you gone because she didn't want anyone in his life who'd divide his loyalty or his income. Whatever relationship they have, it started as an arrangement." I blinked. "You're telling me my boyfriend was, what? Contracted to leave me? To manipulate you," he said carefully. "To sever the connection without you realizing why." The room tilted. A low buzzing rose behind my ears. My chest felt tight, not from heartbreak anymore, but something darker, something colder. All this time, I'd thought I was dealing with a simple betrayal. Instead, I'd been a target. A job, disposable by design. And when I finally walked out on him, thinking I'd reclaimed my dignity, he had probably celebrated. Because to him, it meant the plan had worked. But plans unravel, people slip, secrets rot from the inside out. And I understood something in that moment. This wasn't personal before. Now it was. In the days after Grayson revealed the truth, my anger didn't explode the way I expected. It settled, compressed, became something dense and controlled, like a coal left burning in the center of my chest. I went to work. I paid bills. I answered texts with practiced normalcy. But underneath every calm interaction was the knowledge that the two of them had played me like a game they assumed I'd never learn the rules to. They had planned my emotional collapse. They had rehearsed my reactions. They had mapped out my absence as if I were some obstacle to be quietly removed. The worst part, the part that made my jaw clench whenever I tried to sleep, was realizing how close they came to getting away with it. If I hadn't found the test, if I hadn't checked the phone records, if I'd been just a little more trusting, a little more naive, I would have walked away thinking I simply wasn't enough for him. That was the outcome they wanted. An ending where they stayed clean and I carried the shame. I wasn't giving them that. The first step was understanding exactly what leverage they thought they had. That meant talking to someone I didn't expect, her. I didn't call her directly. I wasn't reckless. Instead, I found her work email, buried in a public-facing contact page from her employer, a mortgage office in North Phoenix. I sent a polite message requesting a conversation about a personal matter involving a mutual acquaintance. Neutral, unthreatening, something she wouldn't ignore. She didn't respond. Instead, that night, my ex texted me for the first time since the breakup. Did you contact her? You need to stay out of this. It's over. Move on, move on. The arrogance of that phrase nearly set my vision white. Not because he didn't want me, but because he believed he still controlled the narrative. Because he thought I was hurting, desperate, maybe even hoping he'd take me back if I begged. He had no idea the ground had shifted. So I planned quietly. Step 1, I documented every message, every timeline discrepancy, every bank transfer Grayson had uncovered. Organized it, cross-referenced it, made sure nothing rested on speculation. Step 2, I pulled my financial connections from him, joint streaming accounts, shared subscriptions, anything that could be traced back to me. I didn't want him having access to even a sliver of my life. Step 3, I researched the mortgage office where she worked, their code of conduct, their ethics requirements, whether they handled federally backed loans. They did, which meant any proven financial manipulation, even personal, could violate compliance regulations. And step 4, the part that made my stomach twist with conflict, I prepared a packet for her employer. Not vindictive, not dramatic, just factual. Evidence of her paying a romantic partner to manipulate and evict someone from their shared home. A potential coercion pattern. A breach of ethical standards. I didn't know if it would cost her job, but it would absolutely require an internal review. Before I sent anything, I hesitated. I sat at my kitchen table with the documents spread out like a battlefield map, and for the first time, doubt crept in. Was I becoming like them? Calculated. Cold. Strategic in ways that carved pieces out of other people's stability. But every time I wavered, I remembered her messages about me. How confidently she assumed I could be steered, removed, replaced. How she and my ex had laughed about how easy it would be. Ethics weren't the issue. My survival was. The final piece fell into place the night I received an unexpected email from her. One line, leave him alone. You don't know what you're getting into. It didn't scare me. It confirmed I was hitting the right pressure points. I clicked open a new document, titled it Phase 2, and began outlining the next move. They wanted quiet compliance. They were about to get the opposite. Phase 2 was supposed to be simple. Expose their arrangement, fracture their stability, make them feel the consequences of treating me like debris to be swept aside. I wasn't planning anything illegal, nothing dramatic or cinematic, just truth positioned where it would hurt them most. But before I could execute any of it, the story I thought I understood twisted again. It started with a voicemail from an unknown Phoenix number. A woman's voice, older, strained, trembling in a way that made the hair on my arms rise. Please call me back, she said. I think you know my daughter, and I think you're in danger. Danger. The word didn't make sense at first. I replayed the message 3 times. It didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like a warning. I called her back. She introduced herself quietly, like she expected me to hang up. She was the other girl's mother, the one who had supposedly hired my ex, the one who was pregnant with his child, except she wasn't pregnant. Not anymore. And my ex wasn't the father. The details spilled out in fragments. Her daughter had been involved with someone else for months before ever meeting my ex. Someone married. Someone important enough that she'd been terrified of the fallout if the affair ever surfaced. According to her mother, she panicked when she found out about the pregnancy. She needed someone expendable. Someone whose life could absorb the hit if things turned messy. My ex. He wasn't recruited because she loved him. He wasn't even recruited because he was loyal. He was recruited because he was reckless, broke, and deeply insecure, the perfect disposable shield. But that wasn't the real twist. The real twist came when her mother's voice dropped to a whisper and she said, "She kept telling us she had control over the situation, that she was handling you. But yesterday, she found out someone hired a private investigator. She thinks it was you. She thinks you're building a case, and she's convinced you're going to expose the father." I don't even know who the father is, I said. She doesn't believe that. The words settled like ice. Then she said something that made my throat close. My daughter, she can be volatile. You need to be careful. She doesn't want anyone interfering. And she thinks you're a threat to her future. The room around me narrowed. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. What do you mean by volatile? I asked. But the answer came from somewhere else, my phone buzzing with a new message. From my ex. We need to talk, now, it's serious, please pick up. Then another seconds later. She's losing it. I can't calm her down. I didn't know she'd do something like this. Just answer me, please. This isn't about us. It's bigger. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My hands were shaking too hard. His mother's warning echoed. You're in danger. The truth hit me in pieces, jagged and breath-stealing. She hadn't paid him to leave me. She'd paid him to make me disappear from the narrative before the real father ever found out she wasn't carrying his child anymore. I wasn't a loose end in their relationship. I was a liability in hers. And now that she believed I was investigating, she wasn't just trying to silence the past. She was trying to protect her future by any means necessary. My revenge plan hadn't triggered the danger. My existence had. I didn't sleep that night. I paced my apartment until the sun started bleeding through the blinds, replaying every warning, every message, every choice that had led to this point. By morning, the fear had hardened into something sharper. I needed answers from her, not from people trying to shield me from the truth. So I did something reckless but controlled. I called her directly. She picked up on the second ring, her voice smooth at first, then tightening when she recognized my number. Why are you calling me? Because your mother contacted me, I said. And because I want to hear the truth from you, not filtered through him or anyone else. Silence stretched, thin and vibrating. Then she laughed, a quiet, humorless sound that didn't fit her age or the life she pretended to have. My mother needs to stay out of things she doesn't understand. I didn't respond. I just waited. Eventually, something in her shifted. Maybe she wanted to gloat. Maybe she was unraveling. Maybe she simply wanted someone to understand the twisted logic that had been driving her choices. You want to know why, she said. Why I paid him, why I wanted you gone. Yes. You were in the way. Her voice was calm, detached. Like she was reciting a business plan. You think this is about love, about him? She let out a soft exhale. He was never the point. He was convenient. He was malleable. He liked the attention and he wanted to feel chosen. That made him predictable. Predictability is useful. My stomach clenched. Useful for what? For stability, she said simply. For building the life I'm trying to build. I can't afford risks. I can't afford exposure. I can't afford someone like you wandering around with information you shouldn't have. I didn't know anything, I said. Not about the pregnancy, not about the father. You knew enough, she said. Enough to ask questions. Enough to follow instincts. Enough to get a pie involved. Do you understand what that means? Do you understand how fast a single question can spread in the wrong circles? Her tone sharpened, not angry, but cold, edged with a clarity that made my skin prickle. You think people like you and I live in the same world, she continued. We don't. You work, you pay bills, you trust people until they betray you. But the people I'm dealing with, their mistakes cost money. Their scandals cost careers. Their secrets cost lives. Her words hit like a blunt object. She wasn't scared of me. She was scared of what the real father would do if he learned whose child she had actually lost and who she'd been using to cover it up. You were a loose end, she said. A variable I needed removed before things escalated. He was supposed to end it cleanly. Make you walk away without looking back. But you kept digging. You made yourself visible. My pulse thudded in my ears. So what now? What is it you want from me? She inhaled slowly, deliberately. I want you silent. I want you uninvolved. I want you to disappear from this, and I want you to understand that if you don't. She stopped, but the implications settled between us like a blade resting on skin. I didn't speak. Neither did she. Then she added, almost gently, you don't belong in this world, and you don't understand what people like him will do to protect themselves. That was the moment everything clicked. My ex wasn't the villain. He was a pawn. She wasn't the mastermind. She was terrified of the man above her, the man whose child she'd lied about, whose resources she'd stolen, whose reputation she'd risked. Her cruelty wasn't born from power. It was born from fear. And people driven by fear are infinitely more dangerous, but they're also vulnerable. Because the moment their fear shifts to someone else, they unravel, and I knew exactly how to make that happen. The call with her didn't scare me the way she intended. It clarified everything. Fear was her currency. Control was her leverage. Exposure was her nightmare. She didn't want me silent because I posed a real threat. She wanted me silent because I reminded her she'd lost hold of the narrative. And once I saw the cracks in her confidence, I knew exactly where to press. I didn't go to the police. I didn't confront the real father. I didn't send her employer the ethics file, not yet. all of that was noise. The power wasn't in the paperwork. It was in the fear of what I could do. Revenge didn't need to be loud. It needed to be precise. The first step was simple. I sent her a single email. No threats, no drama, no accusations, just 3 attachments, the pie's full report. The screenshots of her messages instructing my ex to manipulate me. A blank email draft addressed to the man she'd been seeing, the real father, with the subject line, "You should know the truth." No body text. No explanation. Just the pieces she'd worked so hard to bury. Then a single sentence from me, "I'm no longer the variable. You are." I hit send and waited. It took 11 minutes for her to call. I didn't answer. The voicemails came one after another, her voice swinging between icy calm and unraveling panic, the certainty she'd spoken with the night before dissolving completely. By the third voicemail, she wasn't demanding my silence anymore. She was begging. The next morning, the fallout began. My ex showed up at my door before work, disheveled, frantic, eyes wild with the kind of fear that doesn't come from heartbreak. "She left," he said, voice cracking. "She took everything. She said someone is going to find out, that she has to run. She said I ruined it. I ruined everything." I didn't invite him in. I didn't soften. I didn't even cross my arms. I just leaned against the doorframe and let him crumble. "She took the baby," he sobbed. "She said it's not safe here. She said people were going to come after us. I can't afford rent alone. Please, please come back. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." It was the same man who had looked me in the eye and said I was temporary. The same man who thought he could orchestrate my disappearance from his life with a clean conscience. And now, he stood shaking like a child who finally realized the fire he'd started was bigger than the match he struck. I looked at him with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. "This is the future you chose," I said quietly. He broke. Not in a dramatic way, no collapsing to his knees or wailing. He just sagged, like the weight of everything he'd gambled finally settled on his shoulders. "You don't understand," he said. "She said people are after her. She said if anyone finds out." "That's not my problem," I cut in. "You didn't care about protecting me when you were helping her. Don't ask me to protect you now." He reached for my arm. I stepped back. The message was clear. I wasn't coming to save him, and I wasn't afraid anymore. 2 days later, I heard she'd quit her job without notice. By the end of the week, her phone was disconnected. By the end of the month, the mortgage office had quietly updated their employee roster. Whatever world she'd been tangled in, whatever man she'd lied to, whatever consequences she feared, they had finally closed in on her. As for him, the one who thought I was disposable, he moved out of the apartment we once toured together. He texted me periodically, pleading, apologizing, spiraling. I never responded. Revenge didn't give me peace. It didn't fix the wounds or erase the humiliation. But it restored something that betrayal had taken from me. My power, my clarity, my sense of self. And in the end, the thing that saved me wasn't anger. It was understanding exactly what role I played in their story and choosing, deliberately, to end it on my terms.